got out of the shower, I was covered from head to toe in like a sunburn kind of rash. I was starting to feel a little bit sore in my joints in my hands. I was starting to have a bit of trouble when I was picking up my baby, but then progressively each day that kind of passed, things sort of got progressively worse. Like my hands were getting to the point where I couldn't blow dry my hair.
Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Labour Ward. We are just grateful that Hannah could come and join us today. She's a healthy, vibrant, resilient lady who had really uncomplicated pregnancies, but what happened after her first pregnancy, none of us were expecting. So let's hear her story now. Thanks for joining us today, Hannah, on Beyond the Labour Ward. It's a real pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure.
Okay, so you've got a very unique story. There'd be a lot of people out there that wouldn't even know what's happened to you even exists.
No, that's right.
So I'm looking forward to sort of just letting that story come out,
Yeah.
and we'll just see where it goes.
Yeah.
So tell us, your first pregnancy, was this a planned pregnancy?
Yes, very wanted pregnancy. I really wanted to have my first baby before I turned 30, so I was 28.
Well done.
And yeah,
Okay.
first baby.
Very good. And from my memory, because nothing went wrong with the pregnancy, I can't remember much about it.
No,
So
it was very straightforward.
very straightforward
yes,
pregnancy.
very straightforward, yeah.
And you had a nice normal birth.
Yeah, it went really well.
Really
yeah.
well. And that was good. So you're now at home with your baby, and I do remember getting a phone call on a Saturday, I think it was.
So Joel had just gone back to work. So
Right.
he'd had his 2 weeks off.
Yep.
We were home together, and then my mum arrived
Right. Where
to come
where's
in
your mum live?
Melbourne.
Right, yep.
So my mum arrived to just help out a little bit once
Yep.
Joel had gone. And I wasn't feeling great. I had to go and pick her up from the airport, which kind of undid me with a newborn baby.
Yep.
But then that night he was out at a meeting, and I went and had a shower. And when I got out of the shower, I was covered from head to toe in like a sunburn kind of rash. Like I hadn't had a really hot shower, but I was just covered in this red kind of pinpricky kind of rash, and it didn't subside. So that was sort of the beginning of
The drama.
the journey. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think I'm not sure if I saw you on the weekend. I think you called me, and then
It started with just the rash, and I was starting to feel a little bit sore in my joints in my hands. I was starting to have a bit of trouble when I was picking up my baby. Like it was
what's your baby's name?
Jesse.
Jesse, yeah.
It was sore to pick him up. Like I was having some trouble. So at that point, I called you, and you said, "Come up. Like let's have a look." Yeah.
And I do have a photo of you that we took.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and you are like a beetroot.
Am I? Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
And I really didn't know I thought you were having some reaction to something. I can't remember what we did next.
What we did, you called in another obstetrician,
Yes.
and he had a look, and you both thought potentially this is PUPS.
Yeah, right.
And so you put me on steroids to start with, thinking, okay, let's treat this as that. So I went on a steroid, went home, and I think my mum had actually gone by this point because she had, I don't know what was going on, but she'd gone.
Yep.
Joel and I were kind of working it out with you. It felt like we were kind of on top of it. But then progressively each day that kind of passed, things sort of got progressively worse. Like my hands were getting to the point where I couldn't blow dry my hair. I couldn't hold. Jesse was having to be put on the breast by Joel.
You're fully breastfeeding.
I was, breastfeeding at that point, and almost like, I'm quite I like to educate myself in things. Breastfeeding was extremely important to me. I knew the benefits of it. So it was, I was just, pushing through, even though things were challenging, as we do as mums. We want the best for our babies.
Absolutely. Sacrifice your body for your baby.
Yeah, that's right. But then I think we kept in contact with you, and then I woke up the next morning and my tongue was really swollen in my mouth, and Joel had called you and you were like, you need to go to the hospital. Like, this is not PUPS. Like, there's something else going on. Yeah.
I do remember admitting you to the hospital and looking at you and thinking, I don't know what's going on. That was what I think I even said to you.
I think that was everybody's case at that point. We were in emergency and they're looking at me saying, it seems like scarlet fever, but you don't have any temperatures. We can't understand what's going on. Lo and behold, nobody knew, and I didn't disclose because I didn't think of it at that time, but that I was taking Nurofen and Panadol really regularly because breastfeeding was quite sore. So I was taking that, which was actually masking the fact that I had a temperature at that point. But they didn't know what was going on, kept us for a while, then sent us home with some antibiotics, and said, come back if it doesn't get any better. And of course the next day it wasn't any better, and so we presented to emergency again. And it was actually at that point that someone from either a midwife or the birthing unit looked at Jesse and actually said, he's actually really underweight, we need to like help this guy as well. Like, you're not well.
And it's a bit devo when you're trying to be a fully breastfeeding
I was
mum.
extremely, it was like someone was telling me to feed my baby poison at that point. Like that was how, which now to me from my journey seems so ridiculous, but it was so heightened at that point. I was so passionate about it. But the way I kind of got around it mentally was that I was going to pump, like we kind of made a plan that like, if you want to keep feeding, let's just pump at this point. We're going to give him formula and
whatever you pumped.
And whatever I pumped at that point. And I think that's then when I was admitted to maternity for observation to work out what was going on.
I asked a specialist in infectious diseases to come because we really didn't have a diagnosis as to what was making you red, what was making you have a fever, and your bloods looked a bit odd. The blood tests were showing very high inflammatory markers, but not really signs that we would normally know. And I think we had come up with the idea that you probably had a form of mastitis. Yes,
because what had happened was I had, quite early in those 2 weeks, I had been bitten and I had like a cracked nipple. And I think, I don't know if the science has changed now, but at that time it was all about wet healing. And so we had these little like damp discs that I was kind of putting inside
hydrogel discs.
Like keeping everything moist, but I'm not sure whether that kind of helped kind of brew something else at that time, but we thought it was mastitis. And then
we initially treated with some probiotics as well.
That's true.
And then, which is definitely something which has been shown to be helpful in mastitis. And antibiotics. And you just weren't really getting better.
I wasn't, and at that point in that observation kind of space, they weren't giving me anything except fluids, so the Nurofen and Panadol weren't there anymore, and then that's when my temperature really spiked, but also my body began to fill with fluid, so like I began to kind of turn into this really large person, which I'm not usually. And I think it was really interesting. It's amazing the way that things kind of happen, because there had been a midwife for half of my birthing process that
what are you talking about?
Was so competent but very matter of fact and a bit harsh. And at the time when I was in labour, I felt a bit like, this woman's so like just matter of fact and I need a little bit more like softness or whatever. Anyway, didn't think much about that again. But then when I needed a cannula and I was really unwell, they said there's this one midwife who's so good, we're going to bring her in for the cannula. And she walked through the door, and at that point I kind of thought, oh my goodness. And she recognized me and said, this girl did not look like this 2 weeks ago. Like, she is really unwell. Like, because at that point you were the only person who really knew me prior to what like I looked like. So that was really helpful that she kind of escalated it as well, that like this isn't just a
little
like,
thing.
there's something serious going on here.
And over the the course of that admission, you really swelled up a lot. You had effusions in your lung bases, you were having difficulty breathing, we had you on oxygen. And I was concerned for your life.
There was a lot of fluid and there was a lot of like, I wasn't really fully conscious. Like I was finding it hard to kind of stay present. And at that point as well, I do remember feeling like this baby, like I just can't even have it near me right now. Like it's actually just too much. Like in saying that though, I was still so passionate about breastfeeding. I was getting them to put pumps on me every 4 hours so that my supply wouldn't go down. And like it was helpful at that point that we decided to kind of do a pump and dump situation, that like I just needed that assurance that I was going to be able to keep breastfeeding. Yeah.
And I can't remember the exact sequence next, but I just remember that an abscess developed.
Well, we didn't know that for a long time because there was so much fluid. So the infectious diseases doctor kind of, I think, put to you, like, I think this is toxic shock. They're asking me, has she been using tampons? Like, of course not, I only gave birth 2 weeks ago.
Because that is the classic toxic shock syndrome presentation, is someone who's it's very, very rare, and if someone leaves a tampon in, it really doesn't happen just instantly. It's only like on the very rare occasions. It's just strep infection, which can be present, can cause this scenario where your body just releases all these inflammatory situation, which just makes you react the way you did. But it wasn't strep in your situation, it was staph, and there was very few incidences of staph, because staph is usually the bacteria that causes mastitis, and so there's very few instances of staph causing toxic shock, but this is what we came up with as being the...
Yeah, and I think because they had to grow cultures and things like that to confirm, but that takes a number of days, and it kind of got to a point where it was like, well, we have to make a call on this because it's quite a specific antibiotic that you need to be pumped with. And then they put a PICC line in, and it was really like, I think I was being pumped with antibiotics for the toxic shock, and then also flucloxacillin for the mastitis that we thought was being treated.
And somewhere along the lines, as you started to get better, your breast didn't really get better.
No, so it was like this, I started because basically what they said is the classic sign of toxic shock, at the end of 10 days, all the skin will peel off your hands and your feet. And you'll like release the fluid that's been all in your body will come out. So as that all kind of disappeared, because that was kind of masking how enlarged the breast was as well. As that sort of went, it was like I'd had plastic surgery and had this one giant shiny thing. And so we started doing ultrasounds and trying to work out what was going on. And then I think that was when, they realised there was an abscess.
And to cut a long story short, basically there was needles to try and drain it, and then you went to surgery a number of times. By the breast surgeons. And it was, I mean, your body got better, but it's just something about a mastitis, abscess, surgery, cutting your breast open. It's all laced with emotions. It kind of feels different to breaking your toe.
And that whole post, that was pretty traumatic in itself, really, the whole post breast surgery, because of all the milk that's involved as well. You have to have a drain that kind of lets things out. I had to have that happen twice because I had another rash that came up, and we were worried that was potentially something again, but that was kind of an immune response to the amount of antibiotics that I'd had. And
it was challenging.
There was quite a few things going on,
And at some point we had to make a decision about not breastfeeding.
Well, and the breast surgeon said to me, because when he came in the following day after the surgery, he said the abscess was actually the size of, we could have put a cricket ball and 2 apricots into there. It was really big. And he basically just said, toxic shock is the kind of thing that once you've had it, you're more susceptible to getting it again. So you really don't want to do something that's going to potentially cause that again. But also you were very kind in just reminding me that actually my body needs to heal as well. And I can't be the best mum that I can be if I'm on the side, not surviving. That's not actually going to make my baby thrive if I can't be looking after him properly.
So it's a big decision. It's laced with emotions.
It was huge.
Yeah.
It was a big process. And it kind of led me down a path of, I was looking at milk banks and I was looking at, all these things trying to because I knew how important breast milk was and breastfeeding. And at the end of the day, I don't know if it was you, and you're so pro breastfeeding. It's not like I knew that was something that you really encourage as well, and but you were great in saying, and midwives as well, saying that your baby is in a country, first of all, where we are so fortunate to have clean drinking water. It's not an unsafe thing for this baby, and for subsequent babies, there's things that you can do, like expressing colostrum, so you've got that for their first part of life. And so
there's good evidence that if your baby only ever had one breastfeed, it's still better off.
Yeah.
And I have a midwife who works with me, and we often talk about, because my office, you can see out the window to a bus stop, we can say, when the kids line up at the bus stop, I couldn't tell you who was breastfeeding.
And I think you did say that to me at the time, and that was quite assuring. As a teacher, I did think that, you're right, I wouldn't know in a lineup of kids.
But you can tell which kids are loved.
Totally.
Right? And that is the key.
Absolutely.
And so it's much more important for you to love your baby than to try and die over breastfeeding.
Totally.
As sad as it is.
Yeah.
So thankfully you made a recovery from that. I aged about 10 years in about 2 weeks.
Apologies.
Sorry. And interesting, the practice midwife who works with me, she was on holidays at that time when she came back, and I told her the story. She just went,
couldn't believe it.
She could not believe the story, because it's just so unusual.
It is unusual, yeah.
So anyway, the story goes on, and
well, incredibly, after I had all this, they kind of didn't know what it would look like for me in terms of the ramifications of having toxic shock. And I did have reactive arthritis at the time as a result. And I mean, I feel so fortunate. After that, I'd obviously read up on stories of people who had toxic shock and lost limbs and lost. So I felt incredibly fortunate that none of that happened. But I had arthritis, this reactive arthritis, and then 9 months later, we were using contraception, but got pregnant with our next baby. But that was kind of a miracle in itself, because the pregnancy hormones, I don't know what, it eliminated my reactive arthritis that I had. So she was kind of we kind of always tell her that she's our healing baby. She loves to hear about that.
That's interesting to know. I can't remember that. I didn't remember that aspect, but pregnancy is a bit of an immune conundrum, because it obviously suppresses certain aspects of your immunity, and we do find a lot of inflammatory conditions like Crohn's disease or rheumatoid arthritis does improve during pregnancy. So obviously it was enough to tip your body into that healing stage for you, which is
amazing.
Great.
Yeah.
How good is that?
Yeah.
That pregnancy, again, I think was uneventful.
Very uneventful, very quick labour, all went really well,
But at 36 weeks, we always start talking about breastfeeding. And so we had to start talking about not breastfeeding.
Plan for that. Yeah, that's right.
And so what did we end up doing?
So I hand expressed, and I'm a very diligent person, so I went hard on that.
I'll bet you did,
I saved up that colostrum and was able to give that to her.
And then when the baby was born, we
days.
agreed that we took some Dostonex, which was to suppress.
Took that straight away and wore tight-fitting sports bras and kind of
ice packs.
Yeah.
Did you have any engorgement or any reaction with the breasts after the birth?
No, I think it was all pretty probably a little bit fuller, but nothing major. Yeah, it was all pretty under control. Yeah.
So that was baby number 2, and number 3 was again. Did the arthritis come back after the birth at all?
I think what I found with it is it's kind of like an immune response in some ways. Like if I get really run down or I'm getting sick, then I'll start to feel a bit sore in my hands, and it's a real warning sign for me that I need to back off. But otherwise, I'm okay. Yeah. But yeah, number 3 was really good. That all went
and the
really
plan
well.
And I actually remember, it's a bit cheeky, but I remember baby's born, I think Joel had gone back to work, or he'd just gone home, and he sent you a little text with a couple of little emojis.
Yes, the cherry and
the pair of scissors,
emojis,
pair of cherries and a pair of scissors,
yeah,
giving a very good implication as to what's going to happen next.
Yes, so that was all booked in.
Yes.
And then, surprise, we got pregnant in the time when Phoebe was 3 months old. We were pregnant again, and I think I cried for 18 weeks.
Yeah.
Because that was a big shock. But then at the hospital, when we were having our 13-week scan or whatever it is, I said to the you go and speak to somebody after the scan. And I said to them, I just don't understand, like, obviously I know how this has happened, but I don't understand how this has happened, because we actually have been really careful. I've been tracking my cycle. And she actually explained at that point that when you don't breastfeed, like, your body actually thinks the baby has died and you can become more fertile. And I was like, well, thanks for explaining that on my final situation. But I thought that was really fascinating, actually, that and like, this little guy was meant to be here, and we've definitely had that cherry snip that happened.
They're good, yes. I think Joel was very quick to go off to
he really made sure that happened. But yeah, so unbelievably, we've ended up with 4 after having toxic shock and not knowing whether we would have trouble conceiving again or anything like that. Like, it's actually been quite an incredible journey. We had them quite closely together, and now we've got this great tribe of people that love hanging out together and doing life, so that's good.
So coming back to that time when you were really sick and we were already worried about you, I really should be asking Joel these questions.
Yeah,
but,
probably.
What was it like for him?
It was pretty full on, and I think I didn't realise until the other night how much he really went through when we were talking about doing this interview, and we sat down together to just talk about the details of things, and it really brought to the surface a lot of emotions for him that he probably hasn't worked through, because he went straight from, like, he was basically mum to our first baby, it was, and which is amazing in itself, that I was kind of concerned about bonding and all that kind of thing, but because he'd been such a solid connection for our baby in that time of trauma when I wasn't able to be with him, Jesse was fine. Like, there's never been any issues with any of that stuff. But yeah, the other night we started talking about it, and it really emotionally came to the surface again and kind of uncorked something that has been suppressed for a long time, getting me better and then going straight back into work and just the busyness of life and things like that. But it was a lot.
Did anyone come and help Joel at all during that time?
Yeah, my mum did come up.
She came back up?
Yeah, my mum came up from Melbourne and was an amazing support, actually. And we have, like, a faith community that we're a part of who are really amazing, because even when I'd had my surgery and Joel had to go back to work, we lived in a unit up multiple flights of stairs, so even getting a baby out to go walking every day or whatever, like, we kind of had a schedule of people that were coming to help take the pram downstairs and go for walks and making us dinners and, like, just helping clean and do that sort of stuff. So
the old story about it takes a community to raise a child.
It was really, really key in that first bit of his life.
And after you had number 2, what's number 2's baby?
Sage.
Did were there some anxiety moments sort of after the birth, worrying what was going to happen, or did you just feel pretty at peace about it?
I think because we had such a plan, it was such an unusual turn of events to start with. I think that there wasn't anything that was going to kind of move down that track. And I knew I'd done, like, birth was so good. I really, like, I feel like I smashed that.
Well.
Like, I kind of felt like, no, that's what we're...
That was the word that Joel used, just as...
Smash it out.
Yeah, he says you smashed it out of the park. That was the exact words he used.
So good,
I remember him saying that.
Well, he was an amazing, like, team partner. Like, he was so involved in all of that stuff. So, yeah. And I think it did bring us closer. Like, it was something that I think often I hear that it's quite... like a mother's exclusive kind of role. Sometimes fathers feel quite left out, and so it was a very unusual thing for us, for him to be brought so close into that beginning process that really, you know, bonded us together.
So you're now a mum of 4, and you know, you're just a great family. We know that, and but you had this pretty intense moment. Looking back at it all, if you had other mums that are going through different struggles or something, you know, unusual, really traumatic situations, how do you look back on it now? What advice would you give them?
Well, I think when I think about it, it's the breastfeeding, the expectation that I had on myself that was so high, and it was actually probably a great thing in some ways that this happened to me, because it gave such a I guess a grace for understanding other people's stories. And like, I think the breast is best thing was something I really drove very hard, but didn't actually understand at that time that it's actually just not possible for some people to actually go on with that. That I think, that helping people just take the pressure off a little bit. Like, obviously things that are worth doing are hard. I'm not saying that at all, but like sometimes it's actually okay. I remember after this whole thing happened, sitting like secretly feeding my baby a bottle in like breastfeeding spaces, or like going out of sight to feed him because I was so embarrassed that I couldn't breastfeed. And now I look back on that and think, that was so wasted. Like, I didn't need to do that. Like, I didn't need to be ashamed of that. It wasn't a failure. It was
Absolutely
just a
not
part of my story. And we do the best that we can for our babies and our children, but sometimes all things aren't possible. And so, well, it's a tricky thing, because I really do genuinely believe that breastfeeding is so important and it's so beneficial, and I know all of those things. And so as you would never promote just bottle feeding for the sake of it, we want that for our society and for our kids. But just acknowledging that in Australia we have an amazing alternative for when that doesn't happen.
Well, thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your busy schedule to come and share your story about toxic shock syndrome after having a baby. Very, very unusual, and really grateful for you to come today.
Welcome.